The second season of The Mandalorian is complete. I wanted to look back at these 8 chapters and talk about them as a whole because I think a story like this deserves it. I remember back in season 1 I hit a couple speed bumps with episodes I wasn't crazy about, but the farther I got from them the more I found to appreciate, and season 2 went even further and made me like some of those season 1 episodes even more. Starting with Chapter 9, The Marshal, that still might be my favorite episode of the entire series. It was such a perfect blend of integrating other Star Wars media, this time Cobb Vanth from the books, but doing it in a completely natural way that progressed Din's storyline. As an avid Star Wars book reader, having Cobb appear meant a lot to me. I wish I had time to sift through my old videos and find one of the Q&As where I guessed whenever we saw Boba Fett again, he would just have his armor already, and how he got it back would be ignored. I never in a million years thought Favreau and Filoni would have actively wanted to get Cobb into the show. The Passenger is an episode I still find to be just okay. I enjoyed it, I thought the spider stuff was great, but it just didn't speak to me the way the other episodes did. It kind of became a running joke in the comments of my videos, guessing which character I would talk about every week and ramble on about why they were so important to the story. I started that because I was obsessing over Cobb Vanth, and then more and more characters kept making my mind race with possibility and how they were changing Din. Unfortunately, Frog Lady didn't do that for me. I liked her character, I just didn't walk away from that episode full of ideas. That said, I do love how her story concluded in The Heiress. It's something I feel like you can only get in Star Wars. Watching a frog lady and a frog man run towards each other and embrace, and you feel this swell of emotion. It's so goofy, but treated with respect, and you can't help but be moved. It's kind of the perfect illustration of the Taika Waititi quote that Star Wars doesn't take itself too seriously, but it does believe in itself. Beyond that, we got Bo-Katan in this episode, and just like Cobb Vanth, I was floored by her inclusion. She wasn't in the story just because she could be, she pushed Din to grow. She answered questions for the audience. She meant something, and I loved it. The Siege was back to kind of a Mission of the Week style episode, but this is where I feel like the show finally figured out how to balance a one-off story with the overall plot. And it's really simple. All you need is a scene with some creepy people in a tube, and more importantly, a quick check-in with Moff Gideon. Just a reminder that the villain is still out there and that he has plans. The Dark Trooper tease was so cool, and just a couple added details turned what I would have said was a fun episode into a vital one. The Jedi was an interesting episode for me, and one that I think turned out to be incredibly important in adjusting my attitude. I've been pretty adamant about wanting The Mandalorian to stand on its own. I liked that it wasn't too involved in the rest of the Star Wars universe. Thanks to leaks, we basically had it confirmed that Ahsoka would be appearing, and even knew in which episode it was most likely. Even though it was all set up by Bo-Katan, it still felt less natural to me at first, and then the Thrawn name drop made me nervous that the show would get too crowded. Since then, we've learned that there are going to be 3 more shows surrounding The Mandalorian, so I no longer have those fears. But before we knew that, I still had to just work through some of those feelings. The fact that even though I didn't want the series to be super connected with anything else, that was more and more becoming the reality. It really just shifted my attitude away from my expectations and helped me focus on the story that was actually being told. That can always be hard to do when you're so in the weeds of a fandom. I'm still struggling with it, but boy did Chapter 13 help me get ready for Chapter 16. But before we get there, we have to visit Tython and the tragedy. I enjoyed this episode. It was short and simple, but just a bunch of fun. I will say I think it's odd that Boba Fett catches up to Din and Grogu on Tython, of all places. I guess I assumed he was stuck on Tatooine, but he had the Slave One, and he knew Cobb Vanth by name, so I'm really curious about what he's been up to for 5 years. I think we'll get those answers, probably in the Book of Boba Fett series, but the episode itself was just a fun time all around with some much-needed Fett character redemption. The Believer was probably the biggest surprise of the season for me. Hearing that we were going to pick up Mayfeld from season 1, I was like, really? Him? Why? I wasn't a big fan of the Prisoner episode from season 1. I didn't like the big, bad, edgy crew. I did really love it when the episode turns around and Din starts taking them all out, but I was like, okay, good, we're done with them now. If you would have told me then how much I would wind up loving Mayfeld in season 2, I don't think I would have believed anybody. But wow, the mess hall scene has lived rent-free in my head since I saw it. I think it's one of the most well-executed scenes of the series, one of my favorite scenes in anything anything Star Wars at all. It could have been a very frustrating episode. Grogu has been kidnapped. Why are we on this detour? But the detour works so well and has so much to say. And again, we have that little check-in with Gideon right at the end that helps solidify this episode with the more, quote, main mission stories. Which finally takes us into The Rescue. What a thrill ride. It brings back so much good stuff for the Mandalore side of the story, Bo-Katan and Boba Fett not seeing eye to eye, the Darksaber passing to Din and not Bo-Katan and what all that means, and of course, Luke Skywalker. I was pretty vocal about not wanting Luke to show up in this series. Like I said earlier, I loved that the Mandalorian seemed to be its own thing, and Grogu going with Luke could potentially end in great tragedy, but I'm sure Favreau and Filoni know that stuff is on our minds, and more importantly, they pulled it off in my opinion. As someone who didn't want Luke in the show, the second that X-Wing flew by, my heart started pounding in a good way. I couldn't believe we were going to get to see Luke in his prime, and I think they perfectly balanced showing him just be an absolute powerhouse without going overboard, without negating his actions in Return of the Jedi or any other surrounding story. I am on board, and I do think Chapter 13 mentally and emotionally prepared me for that. I still have so many questions about the future of the series, but I'll save that for another video. I have loved watching The Mandalorian. I think it was a big step up from Season 1, which I also really enjoyed. I wasn't crazy about chapters 4 through 6 in Season 1, but I still liked them. I thought the quality of the episodes in Season 2 was more consistent. Even the ones I didn't like as much, I liked more than those Season 1 episodes. But I do think I'm starting to realize that this show isn't made with someone like me in mind, and I do not mean that in a bad or whiny way. It's clearly made by passionate fans and for passionate fans, but I kind of see it as a gateway drug, an entry point. A story that is told very well, but a story that's also designed to keep more casual fans moving down the Star Wars rabbit hole. Oh, did you like that Ahsoka character? Or Bo-Katan? Well, we've got a couple other animated shows you might like. Did you enjoy Cobb Vanth? Or are you curious about that Thrawn guy Ahsoka mentioned? Maybe check out the books. And I find that to be really exciting, to know that new fans are now being introduced to this wider world of Star Wars. People who may have loved the movies for a long time, but it took a live-action show to grab their attention. Now they might be falling in love with the Clone Wars or Star Wars Rebels. Even when the Thrawn name drop caused me some concern, I found myself really excited at the idea that so many people probably heard that name for the first time and might be diving in to learn more. What's impressive is that they're really effectively balancing storytelling between someone like me who reads and watches everything and someone who maybe has only seen the movies. It's rewarding for both types of fans. And I think that's because it's a show that ultimately does have something to say. These characters don't appear in the story just because they can. They appear to help Din grow, to challenge him, and this series grapples with some very Star Wars themes. The battle between light and dark is about the power that you have and what you choose to do with it. For the Jedi and the Sith, that's the Force. For Mandalorians, that's their armor and their weapons. These first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian told a great story of a man who had lost his way but found new purpose, in a child. And not just any child, but a Jedi child, an ancient enemy to his people. Din trusted his conscience instead of the rules he was meant to follow, and he regained his honor. That was mostly Season 1. Getting into Season 2, we see his beliefs actively challenged by enemies and allies alike so that he continues to grow. And then at the end, at least for now, he had to let the catalyst for that transformation go. This child he came to see as a son. He had to let him go so that he could grow himself in ways that Din couldn't fathom. I don't know what the future holds for this series, if the Grogu story is over or what. I still think there's plenty to explore for Din and the other Mandalorians and what it means to be a Mandalorian. Can they set aside their differences and finally unite as one to reclaim their homeworld? Can they learn that there isn't just one way? Those are still questions I want answered, and I hope we get to see it all play out, even if I will miss Grogu desperately. Let me know what you thought of Season 2 in the comments. Let me know what your favorite episode was. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel to keep up with all our Star Wars coverage, follow us on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and consider checking out our Patreon page where we've been releasing audio commentaries for this whole season. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.